We have Saleh Azizi. He is the co-director of the Islands and Remote Areas Regional Food Business Center with the Hawaiʻi Good Food Alliance. And we'll hear more about that before our lunch keynote address today. He is a farmer, earned his PhD at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and works with organic farms with the Food Hub. He is passionate about listening to family farmers, trials and tribulations, and grassroots advocacy. Saleh was born and grew up in Sweden with Persian ethnicity and has lived in Hawaii since 2006. So his presentation is going to be about the Food Hub Hui, lessons on collaboration from Hawaii's Food Hub network. And you guys are more than welcome to have conversations, but please take it to the trade show so whoever wants to listen to Saleh can hear him. Thank you. Saleh's also my new best friend.
Thank you. Robbie said, I'm Saleh. I'm here to talk to you about food hubs, our food hub network called the Food Hub Hui. And gotta admit, I don't know much about the food system in Alaska, but I know some of our family farmers are going through very similar challenges with finding places for their produce, and so hope that this resonates with you. So today I'll talk a little bit about my work and experience in Hawaii with operating a food hub and then operating a food hub network, and hopefully we'll have some chance at the end of the talk for questions. And right in the middle, I'll show you a video from Hawaii of our food hubs collaborating and the beginning of the Food Hub Hui. Hui, by the way, means our group or a family of organizations. So our Food Hub Hui is a family of 14 food hubs. A little bit about me. Like I said, I'm Saleh Azizi. I am the co-founder of the Hawaiʻi Food Hub Hui, together with other food hubs. We're a project of the Hawaiʻi Good Food Alliance. And before starting the Hui, I was part of the team that launched the Kahumana Food Hub and Organic Farms, not the organic farm part, but the food hub. And that's in Waianae, Oahu. In 2019, as Robbie mentioned, I completed my dissertation on community-led policies to promote food hubs and local farmers and strengthen local food systems. So I've lived in Hawaii the last 17 years. Very proud to be here today representing Hawaii and our farmers. So one day as I was studying, my advisor, which Harmony and I share, Harmony, by the way, here is our other director of the Regional Food Business Center. Woo! So our advisor said, you know, you're really interested in sustainable agriculture, but everything you know comes from the book. And in this program, you really want to represent the communities, so why don't you go and talk directly to the farmers? And I took that a little bit further than what he said, so I actually moved out and became a farmer. And then I started a food hub as well, so real emergent experience. So I've come to believe that our problem with food security today is not that we're importing 90% of the food that we eat. It's the same in Hawaii, by the way. So over 90% of the food we eat is imported. It is a consequence of the problem. The real problem is really that we don't listen to our communities when we plan for our food system. When I began working with the food hubs, I spent extensive time in deep listening sessions with our farmers and with our food hubs to understand the kind of food system that they want to see. And so when I listened to the farmers, they often said that they have an abundance of produce and they need food hubs to address their market access. And food hubs said that they could serve more of the demand for locally grown food that had gone unmet for decades if more resources were available for them to expand processing and distribution services. I also don't want to forget, we do talk about the problems quite often and the disruption of our food system, but Hawaii has a history of feeding itself. We have a history of having 1 million people living on Hawaii before Captain Cook got there, and we grew our food and we fed ourselves, and so we know that we can be self-reliant. We know we can be self-sustainable. So what is a food hub? If you're unfamiliar with it, hubs aggregate produce from local farmers by storage, processing, and distribution of locally grown foods. Our food hubs in Hawaii are community-led organizations that connect the dots systematically between production and consumption every step of the way. And food hubs are part of a local food system. So in local food systems, farmers typically take on the marketing roles in the supply chain, including storage, packaging, transportation, and distribution. And so in a pure local food system, there is actually no middleman. You meet the farmer directly through a farmer's market or a CSA program or a farm stand. So food hubs are a little bit of a middleman. They don't fit exactly into the logic, but they work hard to preserve that the identity of the local food. So I'm going to talk a little bit about starting a food hub in Waianae at Kahumana. So we started a food hub in 2017. We're in a community that's predominantly Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. And so over 50% of our population is Native Hawaiian. I'm new to that community since 10 years, and I learned that that community has a history of abundance and has a history of growing and sharing food. And I really came to discover that after we started the food hub. But even before the food hub, what I wanted to share with you was that we ran a organic farm. And as an organic farmer, we had to resolve market access ourselves. And over time, we developed 40 to 50 wholesale markets, different restaurants and stores, and a CSA program. So the farm had all the components of a food hub. It had a wash station where produce was brought, being washed, being stored. It had refrigeration, it had transportation, and it had a whole bunch of customers. Naturally, the customers started asking, do you have access to other things as well than the things that you grew? And our neighbors around the farm started asking, could you possibly help us sell the things that we grow? And so there's a very natural development of a food hub that can occur if you're a farmer that's doing really well out there. I think I went over all of that. One of the early testimonies that we got from one of our farmers, and I will read this if you can't read it, about the food hub, is that he said, I do know it's a resource that could help me, would help me, and is helping me, because I could go and pick my ulu-filled tree. And for those that don't know, ulu is breadfruit, which is something that grows in Hawaii, and make $80. That's something that was unheard of for a very long time in Waianae because we did not have a food hub. You had to have Armstrong come in there, or Fresh Point, as they may be called here. And the only way that they would come in is if you produced the same amount of fruits and vegetables every day. Other than that, small little truck farms would have to drive down to Chinatown or other small markets and try to sell their stuff, and now they can go right up to the food hub. So I think this testimony really shows that small farmers have a very hard time when it comes to finding a place for their produce. They're usually not invited to the marketplace or the mainstream marketplace, and a food hub can change that. And here is another farmer that I worked with. His name is Bula. He's a Native Hawaiian farmer from Waianae, and he has an aquaponics farm where he grows lettuce, for example. So it's less than 5 acres. Like many other farmers, he doesn't have time to go to the farmer's market. And he also doesn't have time to find a market for all the produce that he is growing, because it's really taking away from his time at the farm. And one day he called me and he said, I went to the store to try to sell my lettuce, and they just laughed at me. And so farmers like Bula are excluded from our mainstream food system. They don't have access to markets, and they're often treated as an inconvenience. Their talents are often wasted. Ironically, though, they represent the norm in our food system in Hawaii. 90% of our farmers are small family farmers out of the 7,300 farmers that we have in Hawaii. And so for me, they're really the foundation of sustainable agriculture. On the customer end, a retail store or an institution that wants to buy local food, or if you're a beer operation that's trying to get your hops, as the example was earlier here today, it's really hard to get a steady supply of local food. You often have to hire staff to keep between 40 and 50 farmers, to keep in touch with 40 to 50 farmers in order to make sure that you have a steady supply of food in your store or for your school. And so that's where the food hubs come in. So the food hubs do that work by organizing and aggregating the produce and provide an option for those that are trying to buy more local food to go local. I don't know how it is here in Alaska, but in Hawaii, we now have laws that are stipulating that our institutions have to buy local food. And so as you start to buy local food, your choices are, you can directly connect to about 40 to 50 farmers to try to get that, or you can work with a food hub. So I'm just wanting to show you this image of two slightly different types of food systems. One is a local food system, and one is what we call the industrial or mainstream food system. Food hubs are now helping to solve market access problems for farmers like Bula by building trust in the marketplace and so that farmers can increase their production. In Hawaii, for the data that we have collected, we show that the farmers are making 70 cents of every dollar that the food hub makes. And in a conventional food system, if you go to the literature, you will see that farmers make about 10 cents of every dollar that you and I spend in the store. So food hubs are really trying to change the equity in food system to make sure our farmers are making the majority of the income of a sale. And as more food hubs become available, more and more farmers are choosing to join the food hub networks. And so just wanted to share a few of those things about running a food hub, and I'm going to start moving into how we started a food hub network and why that is something that can help you bring your food system forward. But before that, what started the food hub at Kahumana was a $40,000 specialty crop grant from USDA that hired me to start a food hub. And so that grant is available here in Alaska as well, and that can be used for starting a food hub. Also, the LFPP and FMPP programs can be used for starting food hubs or expanding food hubs. The food hub pilot program I'll talk a little bit about. That is a piece of legislation that we worked on in Hawaii that provided state-level resources for food hubs, so you didn't have to compete with everybody else in the country for resources. And also philanthropy and foundations have provided funding for us to grow our food hubs. On the food hub end, and I think something that's really important is you can't really have a food hub unless you have thriving farmers. And so food hubs become partners in making sure that farmers also get resources and that they can expand their farms. And so in Hawaii, I think, as well as here in Alaska, we have the USDA microgrant program that suited some of our food hub growers, along with others as well. So I'm going to ask you if you want to play that video now, and then we'll go from there. In Hawaii, 10% of the produce that we eat is grown locally, And currently we bring in 90% of our food from outside the state. That's what food hubs are now doing. They're connecting the dots, and then something new that we're discovering along the way is that there's much more food growing here than we thought. We're just utilizing it instead of letting it go to waste.
This last year, it became really apparent to us during COVID, if we got cut off, what it would be like to be on this island and not have access to food. We became really aware how important our local farmers were.
When COVID hit, our food supply chains were interrupted, but the farmers here in Hawaii were ready to step in. Aloha, I'm Maureen Dada, and I run Adaptation's Food Hub and Organic Farm in Honolulu. What our food hub provides is an alternative to the mainstream conventional agriculture system. By providing infrastructure, farmers, they can come and just drop off their product with a one-stop drop and not have to spend time away from the farm, which is really their heart and soul and what they want to be doing with their lives. We started with Adaptation's farm, and then the food hub grew out of necessity for getting those products to market. In order to help pay for that infrastructure, we started to Hui with other farms. We tried to have more than one grower for each crop so that we could have a consistent supply, because a lot of the original pushback was that local growers were inconsistent, and it made a huge difference in just building our reputation over time that we were able to come through with what we promised. Farming is really a risky business. There's a lot that can go wrong between seed and harvest. So anything that we can do to mitigate that risk and help support the farmer and their mission is part of our mission.
Probably the best thing for farmers is that they can sell us large quantities, and that makes it easier for them. They don't have to go and look for customers. We do all the legwork, talking to the chefs, finding out what they need, and then we go specifically to different farmers and say we need this much of this and this much of this, and the farmer just gets our call instead of 20 calls. We place an order with the farmer delivers to us, and then we take the time to portion it out and ship it out and deliver it to all those different locations.
We're helping with crop selection, seed sourcing, pest management, disease management. We can advise on seasonality. That helps give them a little leg up so they know what to expect in their climate zone with that crop. We're providing consistency to the grower. They know what to expect. They know there's going to be a minimum demand for their crops. They know they're going to get paid twice a month without fail. They're able to move forward with confidence to plant more because they know a set amount is already spoken for. One of the things I've found for growers is a concern for maintaining their market share. If they're going directly to a customer and then they have a tragedy of rain or other natural event or something else disrupts their production cycle, they might lose that shelf space. By having a food hub that they work with, the food hub can source from a couple of other growers to maintain that shelf space so that when they do get back online, it's still there for them.
I'd completely recommend any farmers working with food hubs. It's a win-win on both sides. Being connected with the food hub allows me to focus much more on growing the crops. I don't have to scramble around looking for as many customers because I can send a lot of my product right to them. They have a lot of really consistent customers with consistent demand, and so I know that a good chunk of my crop is going to be bought and I don't have to worry about where it's going to go.
We bring in at least a pallet a week from Adaptations, whatever they have in stock. We always love the heirloom tomatoes. We get a lot of citrus. That's really the beauty of these hubs that are working together is that, now not only do we have access to the farmers that we support, but we also have access to all of the farmers that those hubs support. My name is Christian Zuckerman. I'm the farm manager and director of social ventures at Kahumana. As far as the food hub, we have a couple different aspects within it. We have a very vibrant CSA program. We have about 400 members that we serve weekly. We have the farm hub, which is the aggregating arm of the hub. So we work with 100 farmers here in Oahu. We bring in produce from Kauai, Maui, Big Island. A lot of the B-grade produce that we normally couldn't sell, but we don't want to go to waste, we actually pay the farmer for that so that we can take that, capture it, and make it into a new product.
My name is Saleh Azizi. I work as the Community Development Coordinator at Kahumana, and I was hired about 4 years ago to start our food hub. The way the food hub came about was that we actually, as an organic farm, were pretty successful in marketing our produce. So we had over 40 to 50 various wholesale accounts set up with restaurants and stores. The question came naturally from some of our surrounding farmers was, can I utilize your marketing channels to sell my lemons, for example?
We wanted to provide an economic stimulus to our community in the form of money to those backyard growers, those small farmers who need it the most, but also to make us less reliant on food being imported to Hawaii. For every pound that we aggregate from local farmers or from backyard growers here in Waianae, that's one less pound of food that needs to come from the mainland.
In the first year, our Ohana growers out here with Kahumana Food Hub produced about 100,000 pounds that we helped move to the marketplace. When we interviewed people, it turned out that a lot of this was going to waste in people's backyards. So a lot of it wasn't making it to the market, close to 90% of that. So it's really saving a lot of waste from happening, but also creating income for people that need a source of income. The first year, close to $100,000 went directly back to the community. And it's really about the community. It was about meeting the community where it's at. The food was growing, partly because people believed in growing food, because their culture and history promoted them to grow food. And that's why it's kind of a beautiful thing, I think. Then when COVID happened, we went from maybe 100 farmers to 200 farmers. So now we move about 700,000 pounds of produce per year. Twice a week, our food hub is open. It's open for receiving. Any food producer from around the island can come and see us, can talk story with us, talk about where they have their land, where they grow their food, what they expect to have in harvest so we can help them sell that. The purpose of it was to create very low barriers to entry. Anyone is welcome.
Whether you're a farmer who's growing like in the back of your yard, a small little plot, versus like a medium scale farmer or a large scale farmer, I think having access to a food hub in any of those scenarios is going to be beneficial. Say like a small backyard grower, you're not going to have the infrastructure, you're not going to have the connections, you're not going to have the facilities, the storage, any of these things in place, but a food hub can provide that for you. A lot of medium scale farmers, they're sort of caught in this catch-22, right? They're not big enough to invest all this into, infrastructure. They're big enough at the same time where they need to like get more out there. So, sort of like I said, catch-22 is like, okay, I need to invest in infrastructure, don't have the money to, but need to. And so that's why the food hub can come in, provide that for them. It's like, hey, we have it, we'll give you a good price. We understand, especially like our food hub, we have a farm also, so we understand the trials and tribulations that it is to be a farmer.
The growers that participate with us, they receive basically 70 cents out of every dollar that we make. In conventional food systems, the growers receive about 10 cents out of every dollar that someone spends in the grocery store. So we want to completely change that. We want to turn around the pyramid so that the farmers can really benefit.
I've been working with Kahumana and the Food Hub for, I think now about 3 years. I'm a one-man farmer. When it comes to marketing all these different items, that's like trying to start another business. Farming is just one part of the whole aspect. Taking that vegetable and creating money out of it takes a whole nother talent. And if you have to do both, that takes a lot of time out of farming. And most farmers nowadays, that's what they're faced with. Yeah. What Kahumana provides for me is a market, and a market that I can deal with at a fair price.
So in the second year of running the food hub at Kahumana, one of the things that I did in my role was to create a focus group among the food hubs where we came together and talked about our common needs and how we can achieve our goals for our farmers. and for Hawaii's food system. We continue to run that group today. We call ourselves the Hawaiʻi Food Hub Hui, and we have about 15 Food Hub members in the Hui. What naturally happened is some people started training with one another. We started exchanging customers, exchanging suppliers. We started buying from one another. And that was really our big vehicle when COVID hit. It was all of those connections that we had made in the Food Hub Hui that empowered us to create an inter-island network of food hubs that responded to the pandemic.
COVID gave us a moment to shine in a way. It was a proof of concept. It really showed how resilient our local food system is. The Hui itself, getting together, is a force that is going to move us into the future and provide food security for Hawaii.
Sort of the silver lining of the pandemic is that it's really made people think about where their food comes from. People have realized the value of supporting farmers, not just in the sense of the whole circular economy question, but just that, first off, it just tastes better. It feels good to support your farmer. And I know for us, it's felt a lot better to be able to serve our community, whether it's through CSA, food distributions, farmers markets, than a lot of our clientele from the past, because we used to primarily send to high-end restaurants, hotels, and we sort of moved into this more direct-to-consumer model.
There's great support that you can provide for food hubs. Number one is really awareness about what food hubs are and what they're doing. Awareness from the producers so they know they have food hubs in their community, but also other people like the state of Hawaii, like the Department of Education, awareness that we exist, awareness about what we're trying to build. Once you have some awareness, it would be beautiful if people actually invested in the food hubs. So far, most of the food hubs have made it to where they are without significant outside investment. For the food hubs to grow, we need roughly $30 million. If people want to help us raise that money and help us strengthen the food hubs in Hawaii. And that was Bula, by the way, that you saw in that video too. So we're gonna move to the Food Hub Hui aspect of the work that we do in Hawaii. And so as I shared, the Hui concept emerged after many years of learning from Kahumana operation, but also other food hub operations, and noticing that we have all shared concerns that not a single one of us is really well positioned to affect. But if we came together as a group, we can affect them together. And so we're a practitioner-led initiative of 14 food hubs. We support more than 1,300 farmers in Hawaii. We have over 200 employees, and we are partnering to strengthen Hawaii's food system. We really believe in the collective power of the Hui and that it can be harnessed to solve systems levels problems that not an individual food hub can solve for themselves. By the way, many of our food hubs, as you saw in the video, were started by small farmers. About half of the ones we have in Hawaii were started by small farmers. The other half were started by food access organizations, nonprofits that were working with feeding efforts and wanted to have their feeding efforts go more local. And so some of those guys, including hospitals and health institutions in Hawaii, have started food hubs because they wanted to provide better and more culturally appropriate foods in their food distributions. So the Food Hub Hui today provides roughly these services that I'll talk a little bit about today. But what we do is that a lot of the we try to address collectively the challenges that the food hubs have, and a lot of those challenges are actually that they are growing, that they have a demand that's much larger than what they can supply. So the challenge is growth and finding funding to increase their operations. So underdeveloped cold chain infrastructure for storage and delivery, being shut out from applying for larger federal grants due to lack of grant writing experience and the perceived competition with other food hubs. This is some of the places where our Food Hub Hui comes in. Weak market coordination between farmers, food hubs, and wholesale markets. And sometimes you have complex markets like schools that really take a little bit of massaging and figuring out that a food hub network can do. And food hubs needed generally help to educate funders about the critical role that food hubs play, because they're still very new entities in our food system. And so our Food Hub Hui is addressing some of these needs by solving for the infrastructure needs of food hubs by fundraising and to increase the pool of resources that's available to all of our food hubs. We grow and expand the collaborations between the food hubs themselves and wholesale markets and connect them to schools and hospitals that are ready to buy more local food. And we build relationships, advocacy, and a community of practitioners among the funders, individual food hubs, and farmers. And by working together with 14 food hubs to raise infrastructural capital, our objectives are to identify cost savings through collaborations and shared infrastructure, and to make it easier for funders who can impact 14 food hubs by working with one network. So advocating for policy and legislative change, this is partly how our Food Hub Hui got together. We were a group of the Hawaii Farmers Union. We established a policy statement, an open letter that we sent to some of our representatives, and one of our representatives turned that letter into a bill called the Food Hub Pilot Program. That pilot program would provide money specifically for our food hubs in Hawaii to grow so they didn't have to compete with the federal resources like the LFPP and FMPP. It took about 3 years, and then we had that bill pass. It got a lot of support because people saw how food hubs help small farmers but also improve food access in our communities. So in 2022, Act 313 passed the Food Hub Pilot Program. If you guys are interested in having that here, please reach out. I'm happy to share the language. And this year, they started the program of the grant program of the Food Hub Pilot Program. And I believe 4 of our food hubs in the Food Hub Hui got the grants from this program. It was structured that food hubs could apply for between $50,000 and $250,000. The bill language asked that they prioritize expanding existing food hubs and then support the launch of food hubs where none exist. What was really exciting was that 3 of our food hubs in the Food Hub in the Food Hub Hui, they wrote their first grant when they applied for this, and they all got it. So it's really great that they actually brought about the initiative, and then they actually wrote their first grant and got it. So yeah, that was really exciting. Part of this, what I wanted to discuss with you was the role of aggregating our data together. If you're a food hub and you support 50 or 100 farmers and your annual revenue is $1 million and 70% of that goes to your farmers, that doesn't speak as loud as if you bring 14 food hubs together, you add their data together, and people are like, wow, like I can compare your numbers to our census. I can compare your numbers to our agricultural goals as a state. And individually, it's really hard to do that. So a big role of the Food Hub Hui has been, and this started with the legislation, to aggregate our data together. How many farmers do we support? How many dollars or how much revenue are our food hubs making? You see in 2022, the food hubs made $15.5 million. Of that, 70% went directly to farmers. And so over time, and you can see a big bump during COVID in our stats, but over time it's kept increasing. So more and more farmers get involved. The revenue sources I haven't touched on so much, but every food hub has a slightly different marketing mix. Everything from farmers markets, CSAs, restaurants, they make their own value-added product. They sell to breweries, just like an example here earlier today. So the whole marketing mix is available to food hubs. Another thing that we have, we value and that we measure is our food hubs' impact regarding SNAP and double up food bucks. And so we have 11 of our 14 food hubs that offer online marketplaces where SNAP recipients can buy food and get 50% off and get it delivered to their homes. In the slide earlier, I showed you about 15.5 million in local sales. Half of that is direct to consumer, which lets you know that the SNAP and double bucks dollars makes up about 25% of our direct to consumer market. So it's a really, it's an important value for us to make sure that fresh and healthy food is accessible to our customers, but it's also a market that keeps increasing much faster than the regular market. So I wanted to show you that. Another aspect of advocating for food hubs is actually talking to the media. There's been quite a lot of Food Hub Hui in the media, whether it's on TV or in our newspapers. What I found really interesting about the newspapers is that the people that really read the newspapers every day are our politicians. So if they see that there is a up and coming trend in the food system and food hubs are being mentioned, they're more likely to bring that legislation through at the end of the day when they're voting on it. So newspapers are a great way to get the news out about food hubs. Again, it's a very new concept, so it's great to get it out in media. Another thing we provide is technical assistance for food hubs. And so that technical assistance really is based on whatever our food hubs need. We have 8 nonprofits, we have 6 for-profits, so their needs are very different. The for-profits, they've often reached break-even and profitability already, but they're trying to understand how grants can help them support more farmers and more customers. And a lot of the nonprofits are working their way towards breaking even and relying on less grants. So the Food Hub Hui can share data with them about profitability and break-even models and have them move towards that. So when they apply for grants, they can communicate clearly to funders, this is how long it's going to take us to get there, and we see this coming. Other things that the Food Hub Hui supports individual food hubs with is development of SOPs, staffing, pricing, product and market development, governance for nonprofits has been a topic, and grant reporting. The fundraising has been a big aspect of our Food Hub Hui, and a vehicle that helped with fundraising was actually our needs assessment. So I went out and did a simple survey among 14 food hubs, and the survey shows that the food hubs need roughly $30 million collectively to move forward and contribute to another 10% of food security within 10 years. This data really speaks in volumes when you ask the food hubs what they need, because as soon as you start talking about food hubs and someone is interested, then the next thing they're going to ask is, well, what do they need? And so if you bring together a needs assessment, it can really help you as a food hub network. And then I show this as well because this shows in that same survey, we asked the food hubs, if you receive the funding that you're seeking, how much income would that lead to? And so this is clear language to funders, and this is something I got trained in the first year, is to develop a pitch where, okay, how much do you need? What is it going to lead to? And so if you develop these things, it's really going to communicate to your funders, and I would definitely recommend that if you're developing a food hub network, which I think Alaska is doing. I think I'm gonna try to leave some time here for questions too. So I'm at the end. The resources that supported the development of our Food Hub network, we really try not to go for the grants that individual food hubs or farmers are applying for. So we really need to apply for other types of resources. The USDA Regional Food Systems Partnership is one that got us to where we are today. Now our next project that we'll talk a little bit about is our USDA Regional Food Business Center, which is another source that's going to support Food Hub networks, but also philanthropic funding. And we even got creative and engaged in a benefit concert with a farmer that wanted to do a benefit concert for food security and gave the proceeds to our Food Hub Hui. So you can also get creative with it. This is by far, I think, the most important concept of the Food Hub network is to create relationships and trust among the food hubs themselves. These pictures are from our strategic planning that happened only a few months ago. It was the first time all of our food hubs got together in person after several years and after COVID. Here, this was a few days after the Maui fires, and people are sitting here and planning how to support the Maui food hubs, which we have two, to respond to the fires in Maui. But the relationships between people is really what has led to collaboration and what has led to people streamlining their operations, reducing redundancy, but also learning from each other. Because most people got into this not because they're agricultural experts, but because they really wanted to support their community. And so here they're finding the tools for how to do that. As the Food Hub Hui, we've also gone on tours to check out larger distributors, the folks that import and what their operations look like in case we want to grow that big one day. And yeah, I think this is my slide, and I'm happy to, last slide, and happy for any questions. But really the next thing that's coming up for us is the Food Hub Hui is a collaborator in the Regional Food Business Center. That's partly why I'm here as well. Alaska Food Policy Council, Kali is part of that, and this is going to be a really exciting project for the development of technical assistance services for food hubs, for food hub networks. We're also going to have grants available for farmers, food hubs, food enterprises, and so that's just the next thing that's coming up, and food hubs are going to be a part of solving for healthy and local food systems. So thank you, everyone. I'm open for any questions if you have any, and looks like we have a microphone. Robbie.
Okay,
I can hear you, Robbie.
kind of, okay. So, Sally, of course, I had the opportunity to be in Hawaii and see some of these farms, but I think the situation in Alaska, at least as we've experienced in Kodiak, is a bit different. It seemed like Hawaii already has small farms. They already have small farmers. We have many communities in Alaska who don't even have fresh food growing in their communities. And so, so in order to build out a food hub network, we also have to be building out farmers and farming capacity at the same time. So it's a little bit, I don't know how many other people agree with me, but it's the idea that we would like to see, because of, we have many, many communities that aren't even on a road system, and we've got Port Lions here and Larsen Bay, and you guys know what I'm talking about, sitting at the table with me. So as we approach planning, like for specifically for the Business Center grant, I think that needs to be taken into account. How do we take the model that you're talking about and build out a regional farming community as well as a regional food hub community? And in Alaska, I'm going to throw this on the table. I really think it needs to be by region, by region, by region, by region. It's almost like we have a number of small states within the state, because we have different climates, we have different cultures, all of that. So just want to get that on.
Yeah. No, a lot of that makes sense, Robbie. I think, you really have to develop your farmer base before you start a food hub. The food hub has no function without a farmer base. And so one of the, interesting things that happen in Hawaii and among our food hubs is that some islands that have more of a farmer base than others, they actually start bringing produce from those farmers. They hold the market. And with that holding of the market, then they go and communicate to their own farmers to say, now can you start producing this, because we're holding these markets for you. Over time, we're going to move them to you. But it's very important what you're saying. I think in Hawaii, historically, we have something called Hawaii regional cuisine that started about 20 years ago, and it was a trend in our tourism to serve locally grown food. And that really started many of our small farms where at least there were some existing. So this move with food hubs was like, let's move from serving the tourists to serving our local people. But for that, there had to be a number of existing farmers. And I've also seen the number of farmers growing by the food hubs being there because more and more people start growing food. And so then the development of a food hub network is even the next stage, right? Like, do you need a network if you don't have a food hub, if you don't have small farmers? So, and it could address very different things. Yeah.
Hi. I think there are a lot of farmers in Alaska in these small communities, but they are just doing it themselves, and it's a subsistence thing. And a lot of the times that they just don't even have time to aggregate the food themselves, process it, and deal with it, and just having a processing center where they could drop stuff off and or store things would really help build up those communities and really help build up the food security that we need in some of these communities. I know in Haines, where I'm from, if we had a natural disaster, we'd run out of food in 2 days if it wasn't for our subsistence lifestyle. And not everybody can live that lifestyle without a facility, storage, and other processing. So just to take those things into account too, that there are farmers out there and they may not even realize they're farmers, and they need to be shown that they are. Yeah. And that they can be a part of something, and not just supporting themselves, but helping to build up and support their communities.
It sounds very similar to when we started in Waianae. When I would go out to these families and say, do you consider yourself a farmer? They would say, no, I'm not a farmer. I'm just a resident. And this is just part of my responsibilities to grow food for my family. And to get them to come to you was just not really easy. In the beginning when we started and the concept was new, we went to them. And we even had staff after a while that helped them harvest, especially our kupuna or elders in Hawaii. So, and after having done that for a while, and they learned that their food from their backyard got into the stores and then got around Hawaii, they started being very proud of that. So I know what you mean. There's a lot of people out there that know how to sustain themselves, but they don't consider themselves farmers. Yeah.
Hi. This one.
10 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Saleh. Jen in Ketchikan. I was just curious. You heard some of our legislators in the opening remarks talk about how fishermen and mariculture are going to start being kind of included in agriculture within the state of Alaska. What's happening in Hawaii in those industries, and are they considered part of the Food Hub Hui as well?
I really am not very good with fisheries. Some of the original impulses with our food hubs was actually to support whatever indigenous practices our producers are taking on. We have a project called Local IA, which is like a CSA for fishermen, but they have not been all that quick to integrate into the food hubs. But some food hubs do sell on behalf of them. But sorry, I really can't speak for their fisheries.
Thanks. Hello? So I just wanted to actually... Oh no. On. Okay, we swapped. just reiterate the importance of, and so I think you were touching on it, but just having gone, this is more of a comment and I'll get to my question, gone to the Intertribal Agriculture Conference Summit earlier this week, people talking about that needs for hands-on technical assistance where people are actually there helping with the learning process, helping people recognize that like what I'm doing here is actually part of a local food system that can contribute to, you know, community, food security, sovereignty, and so on. So as we move forward in the Alaska Food Business Center, I think that's important to like keep front and center, that it's about that network and it's about that like hands-on help and not just the, well, here's a grant, go get it. To my
absolutely.
question, which is zooming back out a little bit, at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about how the state of Hawaii has actually passed some legislation or policy relating to like mandating the purchase of local foods or more local foods being available in markets. Can you speak a little bit about that policy? Because I think that actually makes a huge difference in creating markets for producers.
Yeah, sure, and thank you for bringing that up. And there was something I forgot to bring up here as well. There is a huge move for our institutions to be mandated to buy more local food. I think we have 30% by 30 is our legislation, not just for schools, but all institutions in Hawaii. So they have been mandated to buy more local food. But even before they're mandated, there is that movement in the private industry. So actually our private schools have been the first adopters and the catalyzers of purchasing local food. What's exciting when the larger buyers like schools starts to get into food purchasing is that we can make these annual purchase schedules where you look at what's needed for a whole year, which supports their institutional needs, and it supports farmers and food hubs to know exactly and start to actually plant for those needs. And so those guys are the catalyzers, like our catalytics, like Kamehameha Schools is a big private school in Hawaii that have started local purchasing. But yeah, so that's part of our legislation. Another thing is summer feeding programs, and I believe this could be relevant for Alaska as well. We have quite a lot of USDA money coming into Hawaii for summer feeding programs, and we've been able to do something called non-congregate feeding, where instead of serving ready-made meals, we're serving produce boxes out to families. And so some of this, and the Food Hub Hui has got them very involved with this and trying to make sure food hubs on every island is involved. Last summer, it brought in $10 million to Hawaii, and majority of that went directly to our farms that then supplied these boxes that went to kids and their homes. So food hubs have to put in things like milk and other stuff that we don't really produce in Hawaii, but they can put in a lot of fruits and vegetables. So yeah, institutional buyers is exciting, and some laws are mandating them. It doesn't mean that they're going to want to do it, so you still have to look for the people that want to do it, because otherwise they're just going to fight you every step of the way. That's my perspective on it. Yeah. Does that help? Okay. 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, how did you blend, like the indigenous people's worldview of, food distribution with like the Western world distribution method, or if you had a problem, or if it was just straightforward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. In the beginning in our community, we had some folks that absolutely did not want to sell me anything. I came there, I spoke about what the food hub was, and they said, well, we only give away things, we don't sell things. At that time, we had a restaurant at the food hub, so I said, well, will you take some coupons, and go and eat at the restaurant? But I think it was trying to understand the food hub as a vehicle that does what they used to do traditionally, which is sharing food with people in Hawaii. It's just that it's going to happen not just from valley to valley, but across all islands and into the capitalist system. But as we enter the capitalist system, it was very important to walk in there with these values of we want to support our indigenous producers. And I wasn't even trying to change their behavior. The fact that they're part-time farmers, have other jobs, I wasn't saying you should specialize and become a full-time farmer, because this was just part of their life. So the what we were trying to do was to design a food hub where it just didn't take them very long to go there, so that they could pick the fruits, they could harvest the vegetables, and say, okay, let's take it up the road, instead of, oh, let's take this 3 hours down that way where we're going to have traffic, and they wouldn't end up doing it. So, but I think that's a continuous thing that goes on, and yeah, not sure what your challenge here in Alaska will be with that.
I had a question. Since you're so close to information about supply and demand in your local economies there, are you able to provide more information to farmers about, what products or plants are in demand, or what there's a surplus of, so they can make more informed decisions on what they grow?
Absolutely, yeah. It often starts with farmers just producing what they do when they enter the food hub. After a few years, they start asking those questions, like, what do you want me to produce? Or they look at the other farmers that bring in their tomatoes and say, oh, maybe I should grow tomatoes. We also provide educational resources and presentations, bring in other folks that might talk about how to raise chickens, how to run bees, and these kind of things. So there is that education aspect. And each food hub does it a little bit differently. Some even have a wish list ready. So it's like if a farmer comes and asks them, what do you need me to produce? They will show you that. Yeah.
Thank you. And can I ask one more quick question? The word Hui, I'm a little curious about that, its meaning and why you chose it.
Yeah, so the word Hui means a group of people, and it's a tight-knit group. It's a Hawaiian word. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.